welcome to North 100, a Canadian Highlander podcast. I'm Serge. Joining me, as always, I have a Jer.
Hello.
An Alex.
Drink.
And a Ben.
I'm a demon.
The Demon Wheeler is what we call him. Reminder that North 100 is brought to you by you with your support over at the Patreon at patreon.com/LoadingReadyRun. All right, let's jump right into the opening segment. The best card that you're not playing, and up today is me. I want to talk about a little friend of mine, a little something called the Aura of Silence. Aura of Silence. Aura of Silence is a 3-man enchantment for 1 white. It has a static ability that reads, artifacts and enchantment spells your opponent's cast cost 2 generic more to cast, and sacrifice Aura of Silence, destroy target artifact or enchantment. I like this card in exactly 2 decks. I like it in Enchantress. I was like, enchantments. What's the enchantment deck called?
The deck that it goes into.
But I was like, enchantments. I'm like, that's not what it's called.
Deck? It plays enchantments.
It plays a lot of enchantments.
Yeah, but that's what
plays.
And I was like,
woman,
brain, please. It's not enchantment. It's not enchantment.
She's a sorceress and she cares about enchantment. Some sort of.
She has a presence.
Sorcery.
Oh, I've got it. Enchantmentress.
Yeah. I like it in Enchantress. No, I can't even say it anymore. And in Prison. I think it works really well in both those places. In Prison, its job is to, again, sort of slow down and lock your opponent out on what they're trying to do. I mean, especially if your opponent has a name that starts with Ben and ends in eggs. It looks pretty great there.
A name that starts with Ben ends in eggs?
Ben of the eggs.
Do you think my last name is Eggs? Just clarifying here.
Wow.
Isn't it?
It is, actually.
Your middle last name.
Did you take Kiefer's last name?
I mean, your true name.
His last name is also Eggs.
Yeah.
Eggs.
Kiefer
Like
Eggs.
if you were some type of fae, your true name would be Eggs. And now I own you.
I don't know what's going on.
All right.
Okay, so like, just to cut in here, I don't especially care for combo decks, but it's almost like we're being needlessly antagonistic towards Ben
That's
here.
fair. That's
No,
fair.
it's fine.
All right.
I win enough to not care about this.
Wow. Okay.
So
What place did you come in the first season of the LR Friday Night Paper Fight League?
Oh, it's okay. I played Charbelcher in the end.
I think this card is sweet. I think this card definitely has a home in a lot of places. I think both of its modes are very relevant. If you can get it out early, it'll really slow down the fast mana of a lot of your opponent's decks. Even in sort of fair matchups, if you can slow down their Moxen or any of their value enchantments. I mean, Rancor for 3 suddenly costs a lot less, and the ability to sacrifice it to answer a threat like a Jite or a sword makes it a little bit more flexible than a lot of other silver bullets in some matchups.
You know Moxes get played on like turn 1 or 2, right?
If you can get this out on turn 2, you're fine if you're on the play.
Realistically, like a prison deck, the permanent types that it's going to have the easiest time dealing with, it's going to be lands and creatures.
Yeah. And
being able to stick something down that helps restrict their development beyond your first big boom means that they're going to have a harder time recovering, or this is the nail in the coffin by getting rid of any kind of like leftover soul rings or mana rocks or whatever it may be. Sylvan libraries.
Yeah.
Things that let them crawl back into the game.
Just imagine, you go to a junk store, you pull a drawer, it's like, oh, there's a leftover soul ring gathering dust here.
I mean, after you cast Burning of Zinnia or something like that, sometimes that is the case. It's like, oh, look, there's nothing left on their side except for ash and randomly this soul ring. Let's just get rid of that too. So I'm not saying this is an auto-include. I think you have to be very selective in the type of threats that you're trying to answer. Prison, much like Control, is very metagame dependent. But this card does a lot of work in those archetypes.
Wait a minute, that's a spirit bomb he's got there.
Actually, it's a Rasengan.
All right, let's
I don't
move on
know
to
if
some other
that's
stuff.
correct.
A little bit of housekeeping before we jump into the set review. Reminder that you'll see a whole bunch of us at Magic Fest Seattle, which is coming up very, very, very soon, June 20th to 23rd. There will be Highlander events. Come and fight us. A whole bunch of lure people, Beej running the booth, and Highlander folk slinging spells. All right, let's jump into our set review. Welcome to Modern Horizons, part 3 of our set review. Today, we would like to be talking about gold cards, artifact cards, and land cards. Reminder with all of our set reviews that this is not exhaustive. We do not talk about every card in the set, just ones that we think are relevant to the format, and they will be evaluated from a Highlander point of view. But first, we do have a couple of cards that we saw a lot of people ask questions about in the comments. So let's start with those ones first. We didn't do too many, but we want to talk about Magmatic Sinkhole. This is a 6-mana instant. Has Delve, so for each card you exile from your graveyard, you can reduce the casting cost by 1, and it deals 5 damage to target creature or planeswalker. Jer, what do you think about this card?
I actually think this card's really good. Definitely one we missed from the last set review. This is a really efficient removal spell, and the fact that it also tags planeswalkers is so huge for the mid-range and control decks.
I definitely missed that single word.
Yeah, I think it would almost be playable even just if it said creature, just because it's so efficient. But the fact that it also says planeswalker especially makes it appealing for control. Like Jeskai control, I think this is a slam dunk.
You know what this is going to be hot in? Grixis Delve.
This one definitely feels like a Home Alone situation, like where the kid's plane ticket just falls into the garbage can, but like they wanted to bring the kid with them. What I'm trying to say is that this card is gas.
Have you ever watched Home Alone?
It's been vaguely described to me at bus stops. But like the fact that this is a red spell that allows to deal with planeswalkers, which is huge because decks like Blue Moon lost their ability to really challenge onboard planeswalkers with the damage redirection rule.
Change.
Yeah, just like being able to have something that's reasonable, because like that deck, I mean, it uses its graveyard occasionally. Often the point spreads don't go too deep into the delve cards.
No.
But you have other ways that you want to interact with your graveyard. So like, look, if a Blue Moon deck has to pay 5 mana to kill a planeswalker at end step,
they're happy. The fact that this is instant is really quite something. I mean, Flame Slash is kind of an MVP in the format because it deals more than 3 damage to a creature. The fact that this says 5 and is instant is pretty gas. All right, and the last card we want to talk about from the comments, and I know there were a lot, but we wanted to sort of keep it to ones that were very relevant. A lot of people asking about Force of Vigor. This is a 4-mana instant for 2 green. If it's not your turn, you may exile a green card from your hand rather than pay its mana cost. Destroy up to 2 target artifacts and or enchantments. Ben, what do you think about this card?
Well, it's that time of the year again when we get a new set, which means we get a new kind of disenchant effect that's pushed that is not for this format. Mostly because that's all this card is. It's a disenchant. I mean, it's a pretty juiced up disenchant, but I'll say it again. What happens when you have this in hand and your opponent goes Mountain Goblin Guide?
You die.
You die. Or if they just go basic island pass into Underground Sea, pass. And you're just looking at this card and you're like, oh, this isn't doing anything. But you know what could do something in those situations? A Collector Oof, a Reclamation Sage, a Knight of Autumn. Literally any other creature card or flexible answer that can deal with both artifacts and enchantments. Sometimes, you know what, maybe even just artifacts, because enchantments aren't super prevalent, except for an enchantment Triss. It's just too narrow for what it does. Like your card, you have, it sounds weird saying, but you only have 100 cards to put into your deck.
Yeah.
Out of every card in the game, you're really going to use a slot for this over something like a Rec Sage or a Knight of Autumn?
I think it goes back to the fact that our format doesn't have a sideboard.
Yeah.
And part of the appeal of this format in deck construction is, what does my deck do? How does my deck win? How does my deck shore up its bad matchups? And you have to take into account all of that when you're building, and every silver bullet you include will make you worse off in every other matchup. And what Ben's talking about there is flexible threats, cards that if you end up in the matchup they're good against, they're really good, but at least they're not dead draws in other matchups.
Yeah, they're just less polarized. They have a lower ceiling but a higher floor. So worst case, you have a creature that can wield an equipment or kill your opponent, as opposed to a card that sits in your hand and does stone nothing.
I mean, the amount of games I've won with a Trinket Mage just going the distance in the control mirror.
And even if we're looking at very narrow, like not just disenchant effects, but like we just talked about Aura of Silence, where if you ignore the top half of that card, it's a disenchant, but you don't ignore the top half of cards in this game. You look at the other part, and even in matchups where that won't come up super often, the fact that it at least provides enough flexibility to occasionally muck an archetype or two is reason to include this in the niche decks that want it. Yeah,
or in the case of Enchantress, it cantrips.
Exactly.
Like it fits into the overall archetype.
And it's more tutorable, right? Like how many cards in our format find this card?
Mystical.
Demonic, Vamp, Mystical. And if you're
Imperial
using
Seal.
those cards, like
Define
then
this?
this card's not in your deck.
Yeah.
Clutch of the Undercity.
Transmute for.
All right, let's move on to the set review now. Thank you everyone for the comments and stuff like that. But due to the overwhelming amount of cards we have to talk about in this set, we've limited the amount. Whatever. Let's jump into it. Let's talk about Collected Conjuring. This is a 4-mana sorcery for 2, a blue, and a red. Exile the top 6 cards of your library. You may cast up to 2 sorcery cards with converted mana cost 3 or less from amongst them without paying their mana cost. Put the exiled cards not cast this way on the bottom of your library in a random order. Jer, how do you feel about this card?
I don't think it's great, Serge. Collected Company is a better fit for our format than this card because it's easier to put creatures than sorceries into your deck. You're like more likely to see a deck with 40 creatures than 40 sorceries.
Yeah.
And Collective Company, I think, is good in exactly one deck in our format, which is Alurin. Collected Conjuring, you just can't, in blue and red, afford to play the density of sorceries that you need in order for this card to be good. Because you need to play it as a value card, not as a combo card, just because you can't reliably set anything up, and it's not worthwhile to do so, I don't think. So you're just like foregoing instants at that point.
Yeah.
Which
It only hits sorceries.
if it hit instant and sorcery, then we might be talking.
Yeah.
It would be like much closer.
Like
the fact
maybe
that
you
it's
could put it
also
in
a
burn or
sorcery.
something.
You know what this is just like? Was it in the Grip of Chaos, the Cascade spell?
Throes of Chaos.
Throws of Chaos, yeah, where it's just like you pay 4 to cast something, I guess.
Yeah, but even this card has combo applications.
Oh, and this can hit
very,
things.
very narrow combo applications. Don't include this in any other deck.
Yeah. So I just don't think it's for this format. This is definitely a 60 card 4-of card.
Definitely thought this hit instants until just now, and even then I was just like, wow, this card's just not good.
I mean, the hard part is best case scenario, this is an instant, and it hits instants and sorceries. In the deck that probably wanted to play it, the amount of times you might accidentally hit a counter spell or something that's just not relevant.
No.
Yeah.
Well, you'd play it in like burn at that point.
Yeah.
If it was an instant and it hit instants and sorceries.
I mean,
And even then it's questionable.
yeah. All right. Next up, Etchings of the Chosen. 3 mana enchantment for 1, a white, and a black. As it enters the battlefield, choose a creature type. Creatures of the chosen type get +1/+1. For generic and sacrifice a creature of the chosen type, target creature you control gains indestructible until end of turn. Alex, what do you think about this?
So I had this suggested for zombies. I'm usually pretty skeptical about 3 CMC pump spells in tribal that aren't already creatures. I don't know. Like,
You're not down for this? For zombies? I
Well,
think this card's pretty,
I thought it was good in humans too, but
I mean, it's possible that I underassessed.
Yeah, what do you not like about this?
Well, it's not a creature.
Yeah?
it
Like
doesn't kill
that's
your
literally
opponent.
That's big.
Yeah, it doesn't kill your opponent. That's my solitary beef with this.
Right.
pretty bad
Ben and
on-
Jarrett, what do you like about this?
Did you just call us ice cream? Like for zombies, you at least have synergies involving getting things back from the graveyard or triggering off of dies like Blood Artist, Undead, Augur kind of stuff. And you also are a deck that can pump out tokens that you're fine throwing them under the bus if you need to save a thing. But again, like this is one of the better cards in this kind of category, but even then it's I think about how I would feel drawing this on like turn 10.
Yeah, so
and I hate it.
for zombies specifically, that deck is actually super stuffed with 3 mana lords. And when I look at those, it's just like I'm going to play a creature that represents a threat to my opponent, makes my board big, and it itself gets bigger off my other effects like this. This is missing like a lot of those attributes.
So the way this card is written, it definitely wants to be in a Lord tribal deck because it's very creature type specific. It doesn't offer the flexibility to protect something in, say, like Sandra Bullock, where, you know, come in, sack a creature, protect another creature, or something like that. Can we think of any other application outside of a very narrow tribal fit, or that's about it?
No, this is
This is
100%
tribal
a
or
tribal
bust.
card.
Yeah. All right.
So.
Well, I guess we feel lukewarm about it. We'll move on.
Yep.
So I want to talk about one of the more interesting cards. This card, Hogaak, Arisen, Necropolis. I have so many questions about this card. So 7 mana 8/8 for 5 Golgari hybrid, legendary creature avatar. You can't spend mana to cast the spell, but it has Convoke and Delve. So you can tap creatures to reduce it by 1 or a mana cost, or you can delve away creatures from your graveyard. You can also cast it from your graveyard, and it has Trample.
Why does it have Trample, and why does it have 2 ways to make it free?
I don't. This card existing confuses me.
And is this card good? Where does this card want to go? I don't know if this is good or not. I legitimately don't know if this is good or not.
It's great in Grixis Delve.
To reiterate, Highlander, because there's going to be a lot of people that just jump randomly around and see this, and if you're not familiar with what this card is currently doing to Modern, stay that way.
What is it doing in Modern?
Oh,
not good
it's
things.
It's not healthy.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah.
Is everyone playing this card?
The last deck I registered for a Modern League yesterday had
4X Altar of Dementia.
No, I had 3 Nile Spell Bombs, 4 Relic of Progenitus, and 1 Tormod's Crypt.
And you still lost?
In my main deck. And I still lost to this in one of my matches. Yeah.
What deck is playing it?
It's just like a
Vengevine, Bridge from the Below.
Yeah.
Make a million zombies.
This card's great.
Oh, so you played it in Dredge?
Oh, yeah. You just pump this guy out on turn 2, have like 60 power on your board.
Sack it all to Altar Dementia, deck them.
Yeah, it's like you can either deck them, you can attack them for 1 million. No, don't clap. Don't encourage this, Serge.
All right.
This is horrible.
Okay, so Modern, sure. Highlander. Will this see play in our format?
Yep.
Yeah.
In what deck?
Delve, aggro.
Black.
But that's the thing. Do you put it in an aggressive deck? Do you put it in a dedicated combo deck? Do you put it in a Graveyard Matters synergy
You
deck?
definitely don't put it in combo decks.
Well,
but
when I
you
say
put it
combo,
in-
I mean like you're talking about a way like I think of Dredge as almost as a combo deck. Like
Dredge doesn't exist in Highlander.
You think this is
okay,
in Black
that's
Mold?
Yeah, why not?
Yeah.
If you're already
it has
putting
Convoke
so many,
and Delve.
Yeah, if you're putting so many things through your graveyard and then just like pumping out various kind of carnophagy type creatures or like elves, whatever it may be, things to fuel Hogaak, this card can be very scary.
Get this in the opposition deck.
Honestly, this might actually just be fine in some kind of combo deck that hasn't been thoroughly explored. Like, anytime you get a card this powerful in other formats, I think it's worthwhile looking at the application in that format.
Yeah.
And as long as you acknowledge, like, yes, they get 4 of this copy, and 4 bridges, and 3 to 4 altars.
Does it go infinite with Dovescape in any way?
That's an interesting question.
I don't think we were ready. We were ready for
Yeah,
this.
I wasn't ready to.
Okay, I think
Can you bring
Golgari
up
hybrid
Dovescape
plus
for a second?
Azorius hybrid.
Interesting. I had a very hard time evaluating this card because there's a lot of words in it.
Dovescape just counters it, right?
Yeah.
And you get birds.
But it's only a non-creature spell for Dovescape.
damn.
Okay.
I'm not very familiar with.
Oh,
like,
what you were hoping to do was play it for the graveyard counter, get a bunch
like
of birds.
if you get a
and just, like,
Hogaak
birds for
Altar of
days.
Dementia in our format, right? You mill yourself for 8, and then you delve 7 of 8 and cast Hogaak. Like that's one of the, like.
Well, you can't delve for the colored requirements.
That's
but-
the issue.
Oh, right,
you
right,
need to
right.
be able to convoke. You need to have
You
at
gotta get
least
creatures.
2 creatures in play.
That's fine. We'll figure that part out as we go through.
Doesn't
All
seem
right.
too
Okay.
difficult.
Okay. So playable, and then let's move on. I'm very excited to see what the future of the Hogaak
Yeah, the
meta looks like.
ceiling on that card is very, very, very high.
Let's talk about a much smaller creature in comparison. Let's talk about the Ice Fang Kotal. 2 mana 1/1 snake for a green and a blue. It's a snow creature, also relevant. Has flash flying. When it enters the battlefield, draw a card, and it has death touch as long as you control at least 3 other snow permanents. JR, what do you think of this card?
I think this card's really good, and reiterates why everyone should switch all their basics to snow basics. I'm not a fan because my girl Rebecca Gay hasn't done snow basics yet. Here's hoping, but yeah, you should. This card's great. Goes in lots of decks. Great value card.
And having flash is pretty mega.
It's just a juiced up elvish visionary.
Well, I mean, I was gonna
Juiced
say,
up Fibblethip to you, sir.
juiced up.
Ambush Viper.
No, what's the
Baleful
flying-
Strix?
Baleful Strix.
Oh
that's
yeah,
the one.
yeah. Also juiced up Baleful Strix.
Well,
No, let's not
Yeah.
go that
All
far.
right, all right, all right. Okay, next up, we have Ingenious Infiltrator, 4 mana, 2/3 for 2, a blue and a black. Vidalcan Ninja also has ninjutsu for a blue and a black. And whenever a ninja you control deals combat damage to a player, you may draw a card. Ben, how do you feel about ninjas?
I've had some very good experience with ninjas recently. It
Go,
started
ninja,
as,
go, ninja, go.
haha, this deck will be really funny, to like, oh wait, having blue creatures that draw you cards that let you return other value-related creatures, not chittering rats and whatever shenanigans I've done in the past. But
So you're saying you cut the rats from rat ninjas and put in good cards?
yes,
How can you cut Splinter Sensei from your ninja deck?
Well, I had some rats because Throat Slitter's a ninja.
All right, you win this round.
But like,
Ink eyes?
I didn't go as deep as Ink Eyes.
The crowd hates
This
it.
is 5 mana.
But like 3 toughness on this card as well. So like Ninja of the Deep Hours is something that is not the best card, but it has this type of effect attached to this cost has pedigree in our format. Like there was a time, maybe it was almost a decade ago, when Ninja of the Deep Hours was a thing that popped up quite frequently or semi-frequently. But 3 toughness is huge, getting around shocks. Being able to attack into a lot of aggro decks as well. Being in a color scheme that says, hey, you're probably going to have disruption of some way, shape, or form as well, is quite nice of an add-on. I wouldn't go slamming this in every like blue-black or blue-black X deck that has access to cheap creatures, but in I'm going to nail it this time, in Salbara, which is like a blue-black wizards deck that I've ported over from Germanlander, which is fine. The deck's great. But it's basically just like a blue-based creature deck that has some disruption elements. You play the Judge's Familiars, the Mausoleum Wanderers, and whatnot. Extending into these cards that makes your turn 2 a bit more impactful than like end-of-turn rattle chains is something that I welcome.
Can I just say that 2/3 bodies for 2 are secretly like pretty good? I found that in Black Mold that like just playing 2/3s for 2 is like, oh, this trades with pikers and bears.
Like the change,
It blocks and attacks?
the change from like having 3/2 and 2/3 as a base for a certain, like if they're looking to get a 2-drop with a certain power level, or like a 3-drop with a certain power level, adjusting that from like a 3-mana 2/2 or a 2-mana 2/2 or whatever, like just the little tick up on either side of the coin has just made for so much more enjoyable Magic.
Yep.
So thank you.
All right, let's move on to Kaya's Guile. 3 mana instant for 1, a white and a black. Choose 2 modes of each opponent sacks a creature, exile all cards from target opponent's graveyard, create a 1/1 white and black spirit creature token with flying, or you gain 4 life. And for Entwined 3, you may choose all. Alex, you seem excited. Tell me about this card.
Witness! It's an Orzhov charm that has a bunch of amazing modes, and you can pay extra mana to have all of them. I can't even think of anything to not like. You're always going to be able to do something, and eventually you're going to be able to do a whole lot of everything.
What deck are you putting this in?
Like, almost any deck with access to black and white.
I wouldn't go that far.
Well,
No.
okay, maybe not that far, but
Like aggro, mid-range, control?
Probably not aggro. Black-white mid-range. Black-white control.
Maybe
Yeah.
would you use one of the 3-drop slots in, say, like Mardu mid-range or something like that?
well, no, mid-range, yeah. Aggro, not so much, because it doesn't
I
kill
think
your
there's
opponent
better
hard
options if you're going most 3-color. Like in Mardu, I just think you have so many...
Yeah, like this doesn't compare to Colligan's Command.
Yeah, but what does?
Well, nothing does.
So like,
All right, fair.
I'm kind of sold on this for Mardu mid-range, just because, and similar to the whole smiting helix discussion that we had last episode, it's just like, yeah, it doesn't matter what your cards do. If they do multiple things and one of those things can reasonably deal with permanents your opponent controls, Mardu could probably slide on in, or at least try it, and it offers enough, like, life gain.
It's a really good Swiss Army knife.
Just like one of the most underrated abilities attached to Ojutai's command, which we've talked about as the best card you're not playing, is gaining 4 life. Like that is out of nowhere, this will cause so many problems for your aggressive opponents, and has options to disrupt your not so aggressive opponents.
Yeah, I mean, it's
Question.
like-
Sorry.
So think about, gain 4 life, create a blocker out of nothing, screw up their combat math
Yeah.
completely, buy yourself another turn, maybe 2.
So looking at all this, Jer, how would you evaluate this from a control point of view? Would you put this in something like Orzhov, or not Orzhov, Esper, like an Esper control deck? Does it do enough on that side?
Probably not again. You just want your 3-drops to hit a little harder. Like, edicts are nice, but relatively unreliable because you're probably relying on a Wrath the next turn or the turn after. And once again, the other modes are nice, but I just don't think it has enough raw power for me. Like, I don't know, I could be wrong, but
Okay.
just none of the modes are
That's spicy.
super exciting.
Let's move on to Lightning Skelemental. Choo choo! Are you ready to ride the lightning there, Alex?
Oh, I'm free now. I mean, I think there's been a lot of different names for this creature. My personal one was Bulb Lightning.
Bulb Lightning's
Bulb
pretty
Lightning.
good.
Bulb Lightning.
So 3 mana for a black red gets you a 6/1 elemental skeleton that has trample and haste. When it deals combat damage to a player, that player discards 2 cards, and at the beginning of your end step, sacrifice it. Alex, tell me about this card.
It's Ball Lightning,
Mm-hmm.
except they pitch 2 cards when you hit them with it. It's okay. Let me. I'm gonna let you finish, but I keep wanting to have like a Rakdos aggro deck work, but I think that deck has always run into the same problem that Boros aggro has, where you'd think combining the best parts of white aggro and red aggro would make a great deck. But until pretty recently, like that's not really been true. Or it's like you in this case you get like kind of a better deck with Sui Black or with Mono Red. But like this is the kind of card that deck wants to play, where you just like have fast clocks that hit really hard and also disrupt your opponent.
Is this seen play anywhere outside of a very... Well, first off, do you think this is seen play in any of the current decks? Because that's a good question Alex is talking about. It's not an RDW card. That Black Splash costs a lot. Like, this card is sweet. But is it Highlander playable?
Yes.
In which decks?
Rakdos. And Jund. I think you could
that's what I was
extend to
gonna say.
Jund, but Rakdos is like it pains a lot of people to hear it, but if you are playing an aggro deck, you have to have a good reason to play that deck over Gruul or red deck wins.
Yeah. No, absolutely.
And if you can't present one, like you can give a variety of reasons, but a lot of them are not good enough. And I think if you're like, why am I playing Rakdos over mono red?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You get access to punchier options, which, like, this card is an absolute haymaker.
Yeah.
Like, you just demolish what they can do.
I mean, I've heard an example is red deck wins splashing blue for exactly Ancestral and Snapcaster. Weird stuff like that. Is this now
Actually
red?
good?
It was so the origin of that. I'm not going to Thalia get rug all y'all.
Yeah.
The origin of that was there was a period of time where Ancestral Recall was seen as the best card to play in our format.
Yeah.
And it was.
It was also underpointed.
Yes. And as a joke, I started sliding in Ancestral Recall in Goblins,
Yeah.
The Rock.
Yeah.
Just red deck wins.
Sure, just put it
Called
in
Red
everything,
deck
right?
Recall.
Yeah,
That
red deck recall,
Your
right?
points were recall, and again, the points
And you
were
could also
different.
have Cruise in it,
It was
too,
recall,
right?
Cruise, and
Mystical.
you play Ruby. Well, I played Ruby. And it was fine. It was definitely worse than red, but you operated on 2 different axes of tilt. Either you get to recall, and then they're like, oh my god, I can't believe I'm getting recalled by a goblin guide. Like, to not Carrie's out. I don't think she was out then. But, like, that kind of deck. Or you're just losing to burn.
Yeah.
But I don't think this is the separation of that.
All right.
Because that was just a meme of add overpowered stuff to this.
Sure.
I think this can genuinely, Rakdos can genuinely supply cards that mono red doesn't get. I mean, yes, they get ball lightning, but why not 2 ball lightnings? Or with this new set, why not 3 ball lightnings?
So there might be some room for experimentation in Rakdos aggro.
Rakdos aggro, its advantage, or at least its difference over mono red, is it sacrifices a little bit of that speed and power for options like disruption, for like really stone cold kill spells.
But I think that's
recursion sometimes.
That is the deck designing pitfall that a lot of people stumble into for Rakdos.
Yeah.
If you are adding disruption like Thoughtseize Duress, whatnot, to your red deck,
Your red deck doesn't want that. It just wants to kill them faster.
Right.
So maybe I mean incidentally, right? Like, of course, if
like
you
Kite Sail freebooter and stuff.
Yeah, I think that, I mean, you're absolutely correct that it's like every, 1 mana hand attack spell you put in is a lightning bolt you're not playing, and that's not very good.
That's not, at least in my head, having seen Rakdos attempted in that fashion and fail repeatedly because it just doesn't provide the same like top deck potential as red or whatever it may be. Instead, the avenue that seems like work with the best tools that you have.
No, I'm thinking more stuff along the lines of like, Collective Brutality, for example, which is a burn spell in a pinch.
Yes.
But also hits their hand.
I want a bump in the night. I
I
want a tyrant's choice.
You're probably going the black damage
Spike
spells.
Just big numbers. Big numbers.
There's a bunch of haste Rakdos creatures that are probably fine there, and Dark Confidant. It's probably just a very, very light splash.
I want to minimize the amount of times my opponent takes their pen, crosses out their life total, and puts a new number. I don't want 2, 4, 5. I want 6, 4, 12.
Yeah. All right. Okay. Let's move on to another
Unearth this, homie.
card in the same color. We have Munitions Expert. So let's move away from Rakdos and talk about Rakdos. For a Rakdos, a black and a red, you get yourself a 1/1 Goblin, but this one has Flash. And when it enters the battlefield, you may have it deal damage to target creature or planeswalker equal to the number of goblins that you control. Wheeler, what do you think?
This card's so good. This card is like one of the reasons. So there are a couple of ways to build goblins, but again, I think very similar to how people would approach adding additional colors to red. Approaching goblins as though Rakdos goblins will operate with the same strength as, say, a mono red goblin or like the Jund version, the red green. Like, they all offer different things, and cards like this help sell that the Rakdos version is going to be more into going a bit longer and being able to disrupt the board or bypass the board. So cards like Munitions Expert, Sling Gang Lieutenant that we talked about earlier, even like Boggart Harbinger, like it's a tutor, a black goblin that tutors a card to the top. Mad Auntie, which allows you to regenerate your goblin, so it provides.
And it's a lord.
Yeah, it's a lord, so it provides stats and things that your normal goblins kill them dead game plan want. But also, if you're in a situation where you're like, I can't fight this board, I have to have other tools to deal with this board, so you don't look like a jackass with a 1/1 while they have a Lockstone.
May I ask a question?
Yeah, go ahead.
In what situation would you bring Rakdos goblins over classic mono red goblins? Like, what sort of metagame are you expecting that you would pivot in that direction?
If my opponent's going to be more likely to cast a turn 2 Loxodon Smiter, I want Rakdos goblins.
Yeah, so if you're expecting a lot of creatures?
Yeah, if I'm expecting more combo or control and I just want raw numbers, again, big numbers, erasing life totals, I would be more inclined to go mono red. A lot of the slots that would be occupied by Rakdos goblins or the Grindier goblins, instead just to go to smash face goblins.
Yeah, the dome.
Or literal like pump spells.
Benjamin.
Yes.
Do you play Fodder Launch?
Is that? Oh, that's the 4-mana one.
Yeah.
No, but I would play Boggart Shenanigans.
If we're going to talk about Fodder Lunch, please, what is that card?
It's 3 and a black. Sacrifice a goblin.
Additional cost.
Additional cost. Target creature gets -5/-5, and nug your opponent for 5.
Yes.
So
The
it's kinda
controller
like a
of that
Goblin grenade.
creature, and relevant, it's also a tribal Goblin sorcerer, meaning you can find it off of Goblin Matron.
That's really
or,
expensive.
Hogaak Harbinger.
Yeah, exactly.
Or Recruiter.
This card isn't something I would necessarily want, but one card that has astounded me through Rakdos Goblins is Boggart Shenanigans.
And what was that one do?
It's 2 and a red for a tribal enchantment.
You managed to find a way to say shenanigans on
yeah.
stream again.
On stream. Yeah, I think I've said it twice today. Whenever another goblin you control is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, it deals 1 damage target player. So this doesn't have the flexibility of something like Pashalik or Goblin Bombardment, but I've played a good amount of goblins in the past 2 weeks, and just like having that push, having that like ability to go past my opponent's board.
Like, I'm going to attack with everything. Go ahead and block.
This is a card that feels weird to give a shout out to after saying, like, don't play Etchings of the Chosen because it's bad to draw on turn 10. But this card kills people dead. Etchings of the Chosen doesn't promise to kill them. And honestly, if you're in a spot where you're like drawing on turn 10 and your fingers crossed for anything, you're probably already losing. But with goblins, you can make up for that fact that like you're probably already losing with including cards like Siege Gang Commander or Sling Gang Lieutenant, stuff where it's like you have so many top decks that you're like, oh, you thought I didn't have a board? Haha, just kidding. I have board.
Yeah, I now suddenly have a board. My 1/1s are suddenly way more relevant.
So yeah, Munitions Expert is a slam. Auto include, cards gas, and flash. Like,
why does it have flash?
It's just
to be spicy.
It makes things so tricky.
All right, let's move on. Next up, Ruination Rioter. Gruel. A red and a green gets you a human berserker 2/2. When it dies, you may have it deal damage to any target equal to the number of land cards in your graveyard. Alex, do you have any feelings about this card?
I feel like the ceiling on this is very high. Like, I'm not positive what I would play this in, but the potential to like deal damage to any target equal to the number of land cards?
I don't think this is a combo card. Jerry, you look like you had something.
Hermit Humans.
Hermit Humans?
Oh,
Humans.
right,
Human.
yes. Okay, yeah, no, this
All right, tell me about Hermit Humans. Jer?
Well, this is Alex's baby. But
okay.
It's a Hermit Druid deck that is also partial human tribal. So you do the typical dump your graveyard into your library with Hermit Druid.
This
library into your graveyard.
In a loop, doesn't it?
And then you don't even need to loop it. You just sack it once and they're dead.
There's too much of an emphasis on how do you kill somebody. Sorry to go off on a mini tangent here. There's so much emphasis on how do you kill someone if they like have gained infinite life or if they're above 20. This happens so infrequently. Like sometimes you like very regularly you just need to do 17 damage. Just like throwing a number out there.
I mean,
17
that's scape
damage.
shift, right? You know, you're like, all right, how much do I need to do? You're like, reliably 18 damage and they lose.
So it's just like, if this combo is just like, haha, take 22.
You're
dead. Like, yeah, great, they're dead. And with Hermit Humans, if they're above that, you do have an option, I believe, to rebuy the loop. If you need to.
You have tons of options.
And you also have Zathrid Necromancer and the Zulaport Cutthroat.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And 40 other humans.
Okay, so outside of Hermit Humans, does this card offer enough value to go in something like Gruel Aggro?
No.
Negative.
Even you have 2 or 3 fetch lands, you have a 2/2, it might die and like bolt something.
So every land you've drawn is a fetch land?
Fair. All right.
Like this is one of the effects where like yes, fetch. There are so many cards and scenarios where having fetch lands in your deck or like drawing them make your progression of a game or your top decks, whatever it may be, so much better. But this one, like without fetches or without putting enough lands in your graveyard, doesn't. It's just a bear. It's just a bear.
It's a bad
but
bear.
it's yeah, exactly. It's a bear in a deck that already has access to
Better
a million
bears.
things.
All right, let's move on to Soulherder. This is a 3-mana 1/1 for 1, a white and a blue. It's a spirit. And whenever a creature is exiled from the battlefield, put a +1/+1 counter on it. At the beginning of your end step, you may exile another target creature you control, then return that card to the battlefield under its owner's control. Jer.
Play it and blink. It's really good.
Yeah.
People, whenever I play that deck, are always like, why aren't you playing Conjurer's Closet? Conjurer's Closet is great. And I'm like, well, Conjurer's Closet is 5 mana and doesn't do anything.
Why?
This will
It
eventually
blinks every turn.
kill your opponent,
It's good
fine.
in Commander.
and it also gets you value along the way. So this card's great. It's no Brago, but, you know, it tries real hard.
All right, next up we have Unsettled Mariner. This is a 2-mana 2/2 for a white and a blue. It's a shapeshifter. It's also a changeling, so it's every creature type. Whenever you or a permanent you control become the target of a spell or an ability an opponent controls, counter it unless they pay an additional 1. I want to talk about this one. I think I'm going to try this out in my my Azorius sort of tempo tax deck. I think this is exactly the type of hate bear in those exact specific colors that the deck is trying to do. What, you don't like it?
No, this card's great.
Oh yeah,
This
yeah.
card's gonna ranch me.
Yeah, I think it's absolutely fantastic. It's a bear. I don't know how relevant the changeling ability is going to be.
Serge.
What's up?
Did you know it's a merfolk?
I mean, that's a sort of weird thing. It's like, unless there's incidental synergy from my opponent's lords, I don't know if that's ever going to do.
No. I mean, I think this card is playable on its own in the deck you described, but I think it's going to be a shoo-in for merfolk because merfolk plays.
Oh, they're in blue.
And they sort of pivot a little bit into green and a little bit into white,
Yeah, I guess
or
so.
both.
I mean, that's worth mentioning. With the changeling ability in those colors, do you think there's any other decks that this wants to be slid into?
It's a spirit.
It's well,
It's also a human.
it's a human.
It's also
It's
blue.
a human.
It's a human.
It's
Hermit
blue, but
humans.
It's a human.
All right.
There's probably something that we're forgetting.
Yeah.
I feel like there's something pretty key, but I can't
Cards gas?
figure
Bird
out
tribal?
What? No, not bird tribal.
It's a bird.
I mean, technically,
Yeah.
yes.
It's also an oof.
I'm leaving.
It's also an oof.
That was easy.
All right, and let's talk about the last gold card here, Ren and 6, a 2-mana Planeswalker. So for red and a green, you get a 3 loyalty Planeswalker that has +1, return up to 1 target land card from your graveyard to your hand. -1, Ren and 6 deals 1 damage to any target. And -7, you get an emblem with instant and sorcery cards in your graveyard have retrace. Jared, what do you think about this card? I mean, I got a bunch of tweets about lands, and I don't know. I had a hard time evaluating this.
I think this card is nuts in lands. All right, this card was built to lock your opponent off mana forever. The +1 returns target wasteland or strip mine from your graveyard to your hand,
Okay.
so you can recast it. It's -1, kills any mana dorks they may have snuck in under your wasteland and strip mine shenanigans. And then -7, eventually they're not going to play lands anymore. And then you're going to want to recast the crop rotation or Sylvan Scrying that got you the wasteland or strip mine. And then you can recast it to get ways to win.
Or just bolt them. Just bolt them to death.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
bolt with retrace.
Why not? Just bolt them.
So help me out. Help me out with a potential. What turn do you play Ren and 6?
2.
Whenever you get it.
Oh, I just
think.
realized it's +1 combos with its -7.
Yes. Well, yes.
Oh, I mean, it's +1. Yes.
Yeah, sure.
The
Just saying.
This card is just.
It's really good.
I'm like, I wish this was a bit, but I actually am at loss for words. This card's really good. Like, I think this extends beyond dedicated land stacks.
Is it really good because it costs 2?
Yes.
I mean, that's definitely you could honestly play this card if it costs 3, but the fact that it
I don't
costs
know.
2 for dedicated land stacks.
Sure.
But like the fact that this costs 2, slides under so many different things, deals with the things that are important at that time.
Sure.
And like late game, if you draw it, you're not using your whole turn to do this, and it will rebuy
and
a variety of
it's so good
utility
against
cards.
blue decks. Like, so many of the blue decks threats have 1 toughness, like Vendilion Cleek, Nimble Obstructionist, Snapcaster Mage, Aven Mind Sensor.
The floor for this card is 2 mana, 3 lava darts.
It's
Right?
yes.
That seems fine.
I guess technically, it's 2 mana, ping them for 3. I'm kind of into that, actually.
I was going to say, like,
Yeah,
that's the worst play you can make off of this.
Over a couple of turns. It's
Yeah.
But you get to...
Well, no, the
you
very
get to,
worst play is 1 lava dart fog.
Well, the very worst play is cast this and then have a
Ping
satellite
yourself.
crash on your table.
Okay, now...
Or you just shoot yourself for 3, or
It's so weird.
you shoot
'cause
itself.
I look at this
I'll kick
card,
my own ass.
and my Twitter exploded when this came out. People were like, "Serge, this is nuts! Aren't you the happiest person in the world?" And I look at this and I'm not excited. I may be wrong. This might be one of those.
Let me ask you this: is it a not excitement in the same way that I was not excited for Urza? Because it was just like, oh, this is just so busted.
I
like,
look at this and I don't get it.
It's not on the same power level as Urza.
for sure.
But it's 2 mana.
But this was the whole made for me, right? Like this is your.
But that's the thing. If it's supposed
fault.
to be, why doesn't this click?
You just haven't played it yet.
I think I
You
have to
haven't-
play
you
it. I
haven't.
think I
He's in
have.
shock. Get him to the infirmary.
You +1, return a land, and then pitch it to Seismic Assault and kill something.
You're just too focused on the Mariner, dude.
Or better yet,
You're just like,
+1, return a land, make a bear 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 bear.
All right. I mean, I'm 100% gonna try it. I don't see it.
Do tree folk make you uncomfortable?
No.
Is that why? Is the art? Because this art's
Can I
very.
just say, this really looks like a Dark Souls boss.
Yeah, that's fair.
Oh, it is.
Okay, let's move on to artifacts. So the first card we're going to talk about in artifacts is Arkham's Astrolabe. This is it costs for a snow. It's a snow artifact. Snow can only be paid with 1 mana from a snow permanent.
It's an artifact.
It's an artifact. When it enters the battlefield, you may draw a card, and for a generic and a tap it, you may filter into 1 mana of any color. Ben, what do you think about this card?
I love eggs. I don't think this card. Card for sure is not playable in traditional eggs builds. However, as a cheap way of just drawing a card, playing an additional card type in your deck, as well as being able to fix mana, I'm kind of into this card for non-artifact based decks. Like, I don't know, I've been playing a lot of Mishra's Baubles in decks that I never thought I would play Mishra's Bauble.
I've got it. The deck's called Nog.
I like that. I
Right?
like that a lot.
Do you
Christmas
play
time,
Mishra's
eggnog?
Bauble over Urza's Bauble?
I play both. I think you play both.
Which is better?
Ooh.
I'm on Urza's Bauble.
So the Urza's Bauble is awkward because it's I've never had anybody resolve Urza's Bauble properly, I don't think,
I
right?
see.
Because they don't get to look at the card. You just look at the card at random in their hand, so they don't know which card you're looking at. Am I correct in assuming that? You look at a card in their hand at random. Do they know what card you're looking at?
I think so.
Okay, well then maybe it's been fine. It's never really come up. I'm mostly just doing it to belch people.
So you've just started including free cantrips. You're just like, this 100-card deck is too inconsistent. I'm going to play a 98-card deck and 2 baubles. Is that what you're advocating
Well,
here?
Gitaxian Pro brings it down to 97.
Yeah. And you're like Street Wraith, and you're like,
Well,
whatever.
not for every deck, but
Okay.
I've
So-
started in specific archetypes. I've started to value.
May I have an
putting-
example?
There was a bug threshold / delve-ish deck that I just wanted more ways to put things in my graveyard,
Okay.
and they happened to be card types that helped buff my Goyf, my Grim Flayer,
Sure.
my
This is how he gets away with 23 lands.
But
I'm
this
joking.
doesn't put itself in the graveyard. I want
No.
to clarify
Yeah,
that. But
yeah.
Thought Scour, Mental Note, whatnot can put it in the graveyard.
By this, you specifically mean Arkham's Astrolabe.
We're back to the
Yes,
Astrolabe.
by Arkham's
Yeah.
Astrolabe. I don't know. It's obviously because it's an artifact that draws a card. I'm into it. It may be in like a version. I think if there's any deck where this ends up being one of the better things to play, it would be either a 2-color deck that's looking to turbo out a Tinker that just wants cheap artifacts so that they can justify playing that might not be mana rocks, or in a 2-color eggs variant because I have like a pin board in my house about how to kill Collector Oof or
All right.
whatever.
Next up, we have Icehide Golem. This card's really spicy. For a snow, you get a 2/2. So this is a snow artifact creature golem, and is basically all of the upside of Isamaru with none of the downside, except you can only cast it with a snow permanent.
Hold your tongue.
Alex.
Whoa, is it because we're talking about the Doge?
Isamaru is a damn good dog, and you know it.
He's a good
dog.
All right, let's talk about Eyeside Golem. 1 mana 2/2, very spicy.
It's very good. Obviously good in monocolor aggressive decks. Maybe that's it. Like,
Yeah.
because two colors, you're gonna, whether you like it or not, end up having a lot harder time casting this. So.
Or your mana's going to be terrible.
Do we like this in white weenie or even mono white death and taxes? The issue is white in particular has so many non-basic lands it has access to and often wants to play.
Goes in white weenie. I'm not sure about D&T, but I think it should go in red deck wins.
Right, yes, because
and
it's
mono
colorless.
black aggro and mono green stompy. And that's how far I got.
Yep. That's good.
Mono blue fish? No.
Wait, what?
I didn't.
Get
silly.
out of
It's
Get
not a
outta
Merfolk Surge.
Get
Fair.
out of here.
All right, next up we have Lesser Masticore. This card's pretty spicy. 2 mana 2/2. Creature type Masticore. The month of the Masticore approaches again. As an additional cost to cast it, discard a card. 4 mana activate, deals 1 damage to target creature, and it has Persist. Alex, what do you think of this card?
Chug, 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 meow, meow, chug, 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 chug. It's like a sawn-off Masticore. It's really weird and cool, and I like it, and I don't know what I'm going to play it in.
Have I ever talked to you about medium brown?
Isn't it medium gray now?
No, it's always medium brown, and it will forever be medium brown.
Yeah, all right.
I don't know if I'd play this over Hovermere.
What?
Get out.
What?
Get,
No,
you
okay,
get
okay.
straight out of this podcast
Memes aside,
right now.
Memes aside, how this card is... Okay, so if you are playing an artifact aggressive deck, so the Workshop Weenie, Battle Bots,
Medium brown.
whatever it may be, if you're looking to kill your opponent with, I don't know, Ram Rollers and friends, then you should be playing this card.
I'm probably going to play
And
this
you
card.
should definitely cut Hovermere for this kind of card, because it provides a mana sink and a deck that's looking to accelerate, but not beyond a certain point.
Yeah, the
Like,
Discarding
discarding...
it's not that good, though.
mana sink is weird. It doesn't go to the dome.
Yes. But you're also a deck that, like, can struggle with getting past tokens and whatnot. Like, having your Juggernaut repeatedly attack into Lingering Souls tokens feels all types of bad.
Do you know what else I'm going to play this in? Oh, I should probably let you finish your thought, though.
Please.
Unless...
No, I was just going to start
Oh, just
burping
like-
and coughing. Into
Okay.
the mic.
So last set review, or last part of the set review, I think we talked about, or yeah, when
Putrid Goblin?
No, not Putrid Goblin. We were talking about
Putrid Goblin?
Describe it.
just hanging me out to dry here.
It's a
the
2-mana
the one that
goblin.
tutors the artifact of the graveyard.
Oh,
Goblin
Goblin
Engineer.
Engineer.
Yeah, Goblin Engineer. And I was like, there's a red-black artifact, graveyard artifact.
Duretti?
Duretti, trash or treasure, some sort of deck.
Mm.
I'm still not sure what it does, but this is an artifact creature that pitches cards, and it has Persist. So, I don't know. I don't know what the deck does yet, but there's something
Hear me out.
just outside my periphery.
So, we're red-black.
Okay.
We're playing all the Trash for Treasure Goblin Engineer variants. For those at home, they're effectively a fixed version of Tinker.
Sure.
If you played Duretti in Commander,
Like how
you'll be
ho-
familiar with this. You sack an artifact to return an artifact.
Yeah.
Ideally, the artifact you're sacrificing is a small baby, and the thing you're bringing back is
Big baby.
Big boom boom.
big thick.
Heckin' chonker.
Yes. So we have ways to... This provides an uncounterable way of putting a card in your graveyard, which is... I mean, usually you don't want to counter the things that set up things, but if, you know, it's just a nice little add-on. It also provides a mana sink that can only hit creatures, but if we're reanimating artifacts and we're playing also animate deads and whatnot, and we're in the colors, why not play World Gorger?
Where-
So why not generate infinite mana? Now, we're not done yet because this can only hit creatures, remember? But what if we put a Stuffy Doll in here, which is also an artifact, which lets us
Slightly
Sorry
less
for making beads to work
slightly less
overtime.
choking.
That's a real goddamn card.
Oh yeah, baby! Look at this.
Where are you going on this journey?
Look, all I'm saying is that when you look at cards like this, even though Stuffy Doll isn't exactly the best card on the block, mind you, I have killed people with Star of Extinction Stuffy Doll in this format.
That's cool.
It's not the best card on the block, but I think you're doing yourself a disservice if you don't try to acknowledge that there are overlapping pieces that end up forming a combo shell that fit the criterion, right? So like these are cards that you can tutor for with Imperial Recruiter, which would be able to find your Goblin Welder already. This is an artifact card that doesn't have the best ability, but if you're playing black-red artifacts, you ask somebody like, hey, you're playing big artifacts and red, wildfires pop up, right?
Can I
And
just
it's
say what a cool turn sequence Welder into Lesser Masticore would be?
yeah,
That's
sick.
awesome.
Yeah.
That's super sweet.
Again, these cards, like, I'm not doing this to get yucks. I'm doing this because I think that you should, when you approach deck building, if you ignore cards like this from the get-go, you're limiting yourself for something off of preconceptions from like other formats or thinking something's too cute.
All right.
Anyway.
I'm going to move us on now after that massive
Good cap.
aside. Mox Tantalite. Brand new artifact. You cannot cast it. Has no casting cost, but has suspend 3 for 0. And after 3 turns, you get a Mox that adds 1 mana of any color. Ben, how do you feel about this card?
This card's bad. This card's really bad. I
Don't want to wait 3 manas for 3
Worse
turns.
than Search for Tomorrow.
Search for Tomorrow, Lotus Bloom. Like, I mean, this conversation should mostly just stop at those 2 cards. Where if you need a uncastable artifact that you can suspend, and after 3 turns, you can either have a Mox or a card that often, when it comes off suspend, you win the game. Or that's easy to find with like Whir of Invention or Reshape to get free. I tried this in Charbelcher. It was the only list I felt comfortable trying this out, and it wasn't good.
All right.
This card, it just does not do enough. Maybe this card has legs in other formats, but certainly not here.
Next up, we have Scrapyard Recombiner. 3 mana 0/0, modular 2. So this creature enters the battlefield with 2+1/+1 counters on it, and when it dies, you may put those +1/+1 counters on target artifact creature. And tap and sack an artifact. Search your library for a construct, reveal it, put it into your hand, and then shuffle your library.
See?
Ben.
I love this card. This card is probably one of the ones that I'm most excited about. Being modular is a very powerful ability that we don't get to see, and this is a mana cost ratio for that this is more than just a 3 mana 2/2, because if this gets blown up, you have other options, specifically options with the constructs that you will be finding. There are
Ben,
a lot of
what's Scrap Trawler's creature type?
Well, I'm glad you asked, Jer. It's a construct.
What's Walking Ballista's creature type?
Well, I'm glad you asked, Jer. It's construct.
Okay, thanks.
So the thing about constructs are they're some of the best artifact creatures in the game. Arcbound Ravager.
Not a construct.
It's
a
not?
be-
Oh, it's a
it's
beast.
only a
It's a
beast.
beast, which doesn't make any sense.
It makes
Right,
perfect
right.
sense.
It's an artifact construct.
Look at its art.
Can we please bring up the
No, I'm
art for
curious.
Arcbound Ravager? No,
Oh,
Vij will get it.
original art.
No. I'm constructs.
Original or do not steal.
Whatever.
It's made of artifacts. What do you mean, beast?
That looks as
It's
though
pretty
it's
beastly to me.
constructed from...
Yeah.
Things.
Either way.
What deck are you putting this in?
Medium brown. Or mono blue. Blue, red, the like battle botsy tinker decks. I think you should try this out
probably
in your
gonna try
workshop
that.
weenie
Yeah.
decks.
Even just a 3 mana 2/2 with modular.
Yeah, great.
It does a lot.
Yeah, keep going. Give me more constructs, baby.
All right.
No, not that.
Perfect, Vij. Well done.
Deconstruct.
Okay.
Let's move on to our next artifact then. A couple of very spicy ones here. Let's talk about the new swords. So first up, we have Sword of Truth and Justice. So cost 3 to cast, equips for 2. Equipped creature gets +2/+2 and has protection from white and blue. Whenever equipped creature deals combat damage to a player, put a +1/+1 counter on a creature you control, and then proliferate. Jer, what do you think of this?
I'm not a huge fan of this one. I think it's good in the 4-color counters creature deck. It's obviously very good there. But other than that, I think putting a counter on a thing and then proliferating is generally pretty weak unless you're already have a bunch of stuff going on. And one of the best things about swords is that you can just suit up a creature and you don't need to extend anything more into the board. They have to deal with this thing that's harder to deal with because it has protection from 2 colors. And I also think protection from white and blue is one of the worst color combinations to have protection from because there's not many blue creatures. Although it will come up, you will be able to get past True Name Nemesis sometimes. It will be nice. And white will just wrath you.
That's very... Yeah. All right. And then we have the Sword of Sinew and Steel. So 3 to cast, 2 to equip. Equipped creature gets +2/+2, has protection from red and black. And whenever equipped creature deals combat damage to a player, destroy up to 1 target planeswalker and up to 1 target artifact. Alex, how do you feel about this sword?
Youch! Black and red are conversely some of the best ones to have protection from because that's where 2/3 of the removal in the game are in.
Oh, the target
Those
removal.
are the removal colors.
Yeah.
Yes.
The single target removal colors.
Blow up a whole planeswalker? Zoinks. And an artifact?
And it beats one of the classic sword paradigms of, do I attack the planeswalker and kill it, or do I attack them and get the sword trigger? With this one, you just always attack them and get the sword trigger.
That's very true. I mean, the only sword that gets around that is occasionally sort of Fire and Ice, because you're drawing that card's really important, and I can kind of keep the planeswalker in check with 2 damage, but...
Just don't misclick on Magic Online and blow up your own sword. I'm definitely going to do it at least once.
Youch. All right, and let's talk about our last artifact here, and this is actually from the cycle. Let's talk about the new talismans. So, for example, Talisman of Conviction. So 2 mana, tap, you can add a colorless, or you can add, and now they've added the other 5 cycles of colors. So you can add
enemy
red
colors.
or white, the enemy colors, but it deals 1 damage to you. Now, this is a long time coming. How long ago were the previous talismans printed?
2004.
So it's been...
2003?
After that, wasn't it?
2003, 2000.
It's been at least 10 years that we've had...
Mirrodin was the initial one.
That we've had the ally colors, but never the enemy colors. And I don't know... Are these as relevant now as they used to be? Because I don't even know how many decks are playing as many rocks in modern formats as some of the older ones.
The same decks that were playing Mana Rocks in 2004 are playing Mana Rocks in 2019. If anything, these provide, most importantly, this adds 2 new talismans that add blue. So the blue-green one and the blue-red one are the 2 ones that Paradox.
Blue-green is arguably now the best talisman.
Yeah. It's the one, that's what
For
Paradox
Proportation?
needs. Gets you Proportation, Sylvan Scrying, Reap, and so the red providing for Wheel of Fortune, those ones are
maybe
gas.
a Duretti Splash.
And then honestly, red, white, and black, white, those are 2 color combinations that...
I was really frustrated that Mardu Prison never had access to these colors.
Yeah.
So you'd be playing the signets, but you really wanted to be playing the talismans. So that fixes that. But I'm honestly, all your conversation about shifting from big red to medium red, of a lot of these decks no longer wanting to put their cards into ramp spells because of the inconsistency of either having all ramp targets and no acceleration, or all acceleration, no top end there. So are these cards now coming out at a time that a lot of the decks that would traditionally play them won't anymore?
Well,
they're still good.
You just have to approach a new way to play big red, right? The ways of the past don't necessarily work unless your metagame accounts for it.
I honestly, here's an example. I would play big red. I'd probably have 23 to 25 artifacts plus artifact lands, and you'd also try and get your acceleration in stuff like Mox Opal. And you'd play this huge density of rocks, and you'd be like, that's great, I'll just wildfire, and then I'll have all these rocks left behind. I don't need lands. Or you do a red-white splash and then get in. And the whole strategy was take out their lands, rely off of all this artifact mana that you have. But you have all these inherent inconsistencies from that. And now that these talismans are back, I don't know if I'm suddenly revisiting that archetype, because that problem was never solved.
I think you should, especially because the trajectory of what that deck does over the first 4 turns has changed drastically. I think if you plot it out as being able to reliably have more 2-mana rocks that provide the colors of your deck on turn 3, which lets you play a 4-mana planeswalker, which then lets you play your 5-mana planeswalker the next turn. Like, that's your game plan into a wildfire.
And there's also better payoffs that don't cost 18 mana.
I guess the payoffs have gotten better in recent time.
And your cards combat medium red especially quite well. So maybe that's one of the justifications for branching out into this kind of deck, because if you can go a 4-mana walker into an arc slogger, which has 5 toughness, so it gets around a flame slash, gets around fiery
Also lives
confluence.
through a wildfire.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
you have these tools to fight those decks.
All right, let's move on to lands. First up, let's talk about Frostwalk Bastion. So Snowland taps to add a colorless, but of course, since it's a snowland, that also means you can tap it for snow. For 1 and a snow, until end of turn, it becomes a 2/3 construct artifact creature, still a land. And whenever it deals combat damage to a creature, tap that creature, and it doesn't untap until its next untap step. Its controller's next untap step. It freezes it. Wheeler.
So again, this is one of the this is why I'm praising the 2/3 and the 3/2, is that this lets you crunch into 2/2s or crunch into 2/2s, eat them up. Lets you attack into stuff like Courser of Crewfix and whatnot, and be able to lock those very pesky defensive cards down that decks that are going to want to add more creature lands can struggle with. Right? I'm not entirely certain that this is going to become a staple for mono red, so the low curve decks, but the mono red pilots locally seem pretty enthused about it, and I for sure would like to try this out in medium red or medium green. So basically, if you can justify having more creature lands that are able to provide pressure and mess with their board, as well as, got to cast the Thought Knots here somehow.
I was just going to say, I feel like this might be really good in Pox. Especially the single-colored version. You might struggle to activate it in, Black X Pox, but, Mono Black Pox, this is probably perfect.
When you just want a huge density of creature lands in that deck, and you're eventually going to draw a basic, so...
Very narrow interaction. Mishra's Factory. When it taps to pump a creature type, is it construct?
Assembly worker.
It's assembly worker, right? I was like, wait a second. Is this finally relevant? The answer is no.
It can pump Mutavault.
Yeah.
It can pump that new. What was that card we were talking about? Was it the Ingenious Infiltrator? No.
That'll be the.
That 2/2. No, the Unsettled Mariner.
Yeah.
Ooh. All right. Let's talk next about Hall of Heliod. This is a very interesting land. So, legendary land, taps to add a colorless. What's up?
No, go ahead.
Oh.
I'm just happy for you.
Oh, thank you. 1 and a white, tap, put target enchantment card from your graveyard on top of your library. Jer.
I'm sorry, what?
This is an Enchantress card, predominantly. Lets you rebuy enchantments that you might sacrifice or might have gotten countered. I could also see potentially playing it in a blue-white control build that relies upon stuff like Moat and Oblivion Rings a little more heavily. Still working on that, but I think it's just predominantly an Enchantress card.
Cycle your cast out, get it back.
I think one of the biggest strengths of Enchantress is its ability to recur things, like cards like Replenish. Replenish is probably the single strongest card in Enchantress. It's a 4-mana sorcery for 3 and a white that just says, take all of your enchantments from your graveyard and put them into play. And so it already has a lot. I don't know how a lot of enchantments end up in your graveyard. A lot of people just instantly have ways to deal with them, but an effect like this is something that I think Enchantress really needed.
Well, Serge, we began the podcast with the card called
Aura of Silence,
which puts itself in the graveyard.
So I've always... All right. It's my turn to take us on a little journey here. I've always wondered about effects like Sun Titan. And what's the 5-mana enchantment?
Starfield of Nyx.
Starfield of Nyx. These effects that can let you recur cheap auras on a stick over and over. And suddenly, is Aura of Silence just better than Disenchant, even if you only cast it once? If you have the ability to recur it over and over.
I'm confused about this question. Is Aura of Silence better than Disenchant in an Enchantress deck?
No. Removing Enchantress. If you have these other effects,
But you're not playing Starfield of Nyx in a regular deck.
all right. Pump this out.
All right.
Sell this.
Doomblade versus Seal of Doom.
Doomblade.
100% of the time.
Doomblade 100% of the time, but suddenly if you also have access to cards like Sun Titan and Starfield of Nyx, where you have an engine that could potentially recur it later in the game.
But then I feel like I'm making concessions not only for a card that should just be a bread and butter, get this done with, move on, but I'm also just reducing the power level of my deck by making my top end vulnerable.
Okay.
Or like
so that's the example we're bringing up here. So what the Hall of Heliod, I can't remember.
Hall of Heliod's Generosity.
Okay. Hall of Heliod's Generosity. It's interesting. Like, do you now use this as a build around to do some type of engine to recur those effects over and over, or is this just value? Is this the same thing as what's the artifact card?
Academy
Runes.
Or
Is this now the just finishing that cycle of those cards that you just have this because it offers a lot of utility, or is this the sort of card that now becomes sort of a linchpin of a deck and you try and get an engine going with it?
It does let you lock someone out with solitary confinement.
Oh, baby.
Right. Solitary confinement, 2 and a white enchantment, beginning of you skip your draw step, beginning of your upkeep, discard a card, or sacrifice solitary confinement. You have Shroud, prevent all damage dealt to you. So you just never pay this, goes to your graveyard, you Generosity back, you play it. It's not the greatest lock, but it's a lock.
It's a soft lock.
That's interesting. Yeah, that's better than a lot of other solitary confinement locks.
There's a blue-white deck that's been running around the Magic Online community.
Yeah.
That is just like an OG replenish deck. Like it plays like gifts, intuition. It sets up these piles. It has attunement to fill a very specific lock of like Solemnity, Decree of Silence. And the first time I played it, I was like, oh, haha, that's cool, until I started losing to it. And it was just like, oh, this is just another long line of they resolve gifts ungiven, I'm probably losing. But it can play out these fair cards like Aura of Silence with Hall of Heliod's Generosity. So you're still a dedicated enchantment-based combo deck, but if you, again, it's like, I'm going to say shenanigans again. If it's like shenanigans and you say to yourself, if I just draw a disenchantment every single turn.
Disenchantment?
Disenchantment.
Disenchantress.
Look, if I draw disenchantment every single turn of the game.
Oh, my boy cast disenchantment on me, and
I got this Aura of Silence for you.
Sure.
Cheapest
Sometimes
one on
it's
the
great,
block.
sometimes it's not.
Yeah,
I understand.
yeah.
All right, let's move on. Let's talk about another very exciting cycle that Modern Horizons added. Let's talk about the Horizon lands. For example, Sun-Baked Canyon. So they tap for the enemy colors. So tap, pay 1 life, and add red or white or whatever. Or for 1 and tap and sacrifice it, draw a card. We only used to have green and white. Now we have a bunch more. What impact do you think these new duels are going to have on the format? Just anybody jump in.
Cards are great.
Yeah.
Put them in. Like,
one thing I'm going to say is you have to think about what decks want them, because not every deck wants to play Horizon Canopy as is. Like, somebody asked me about putting them in Jeskai control, and I actually think Jeskai control wants 0 of these lands. I don't think you want to sack your lands to draw cards. I think you want a mana advantage. I think you have lots of ways to use your mana in that deck.
You know what might be the hottest one of this cycle is the green-black one.
Well, the Sun-Baked Canyon's in a Sun-Baked
Get out of my
All right.
swamp.
everywhere.
All right, Alex, finish your thought.
Well, like, there's so many care about land, care about graveyard land. I mean, I'm just gonna say get Rockdog deck. Like, this card's awesome. You know?
I would. So for a long time in the lands deck, especially if you look at like a bug land shell, your value engine came from the cycling lands. And that's not high praise. You'd be like, oh, I've got this great value engine right now, or I've got like 2 or 3 cycle lands and Life from the Loam. I could, while doing nothing, draw a couple of extra cards a turn. And maybe 5 to 10 years ago, the format may have been slow enough to pull that off, but it just didn't do enough.
Serge, have you ever wanted to make a 5/3 and draw a card?
That's the thing. Suddenly, the amount of applications you can get out of these cards is way better. Like you're still drawing a card, but these also don't come into play tapped, which is huge. You get to choose when you want to draw a card. It just offers so much more flexibility in that shell. I think unless you're playing Tour de France, these cards have now forever replaced the cycling lands as your draw engine in the lands decks.
Why not both?
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like you definitely want, because these do require a land drop, which is a lot more than just pumping a green to get rid of a Tranquil Thicket.
And like the cycling lands are super good with Life from the Loam, being able to like
Instant speed.
cycle it, get Loam back, loam the cycling land plus 2 others back.
I had a very hard time. I cut the cycle lands from my decks years ago, and maybe it involves a new revisitation now. Maybe, I don't know.
I don't know, how many effects do you have whenever a land goes anywhere?
That's the hard thing with those effects, is there's very few that care about that, so often you're playing them literally just to draw cards.
Sounds fine to me. I love drawing cards.
You know what?
I said that like a toddler, and I don't know why. I love drawing cards.
The only thing better than drawing cards is dredging.
Yeah, I love dredging.
Oops, spaghetti.
I do want to comment that having played these in monocolored aggro decks, I've really enjoyed that. Being able to get a rebuy is something that you don't get to see too. Like, we've only ever had Horizon Canopy, right? But Death and Taxes has always played Horizon Canopy. Various green decks, mono green decks have played Horizon Canopy, also just because like
White Weenie
missing
too.
a beat. Yeah, White Weenie for sure. And like, not to talk too much about Goblins, but having played both the red ones and Goblins and have them feel like, well, I just need to get anything, and here's this rebuy that I have at the cost of like maybe taking 2 to 3 damage over the game from them if it goes a bit longer. But I mean, if that much damage is like causing you to lose a whole bunch of other games versus other aggro decks, then like sure, maybe you can cut them or reevaluate just how fast your deck is and your role in the matchup.
All right, let's talk about another very exciting card, Prismatic Vista. So this is a fetch land, but tap, pay 1 life, and sacrifice it. You may only search for a basic land card, but it comes onto the battlefield untapped. So very interesting, and I think one of the more interesting applications on this, it also finds wastes.
Serge, it also finds snow basics.
Yeah.
Yes.
I don't know, team. How do you feel about this card?
It's great.
Card's
Play
great.
it in basically every deck.
love it.
Is there a deck where you're not going to play it? Like, is this now an auto include in every deck?
It's
Monocolored decks
really
that don't
bad
play
in
fetches.
really bad in Hermit Druid.
Yes.
Yeah, don't play this in D&T.
Are you playing this in a monocolor deck to thin, or only?
Not
You
to
just
thin.
said the word. Thinning does not exist.
Ignore it.
You are playing this in a monocolor deck to get around a variety of cards in the format that interact with the top of your deck, which can often lead to unfavorable draws when you draw your Stromkirk Noble or your Llanowar Elf on turn 5, or by cards in your own deck, such as Grim Lavamancer, Knight of the Reliquary, Jace the Mind Sculptor, Brainstorm,
Searing Blaze,
Tireless Tracker, a whole variety of things.
Just because we're definitely going to get comments, could you elaborate on thinning not being a thing?
I'm going to give this to Jer because I've had to explain this so many times I'm burnt out, and Jer might also be burnt out, but here we are.
All right.
Explain now or explain in the comments.
Yes.
So if you were to play a land and it wasn't a fetch land, or if you were to play to a land and it was a fetch land and you fetched land out of your deck, the odds of your top card being a land are in either scenario, the difference between them is so insignificant it doesn't matter, and the point of life will matter far more often than that percentage chance
to
draw
go even
gas.
a level above that, it is the theory that by playing a fetch land, it will reduce the odds of drawing a future land, and so you can thin by removing any dead draws, and so that adds to what.
It's a fallacy.
I mean, it's probably about as useful as a lucky rabbit's foot, which is to say, not at all.
Ben loves rabbits.
I love rabbits. I just don't like the idea of why would you cut off a foot for something that
somebody
doesn't
else
exist?
cuts it off for
Oh,
you.
I know, and I'll find you.
All right, and for the last card that we're going to talk about today, and this is something that we've already talked about a lot, we have snow basics.
Oh.
Like as just a dedicated spot. I mean, we've already basically said 8 or 9 times throughout the set review that is every deck switching to snow basics?
I think theoretically every deck should switch to snow basics if they were looking to play optimally. Even if they're not playing anything that's relevant, you might end up with your opponent's card that's relevant, or you could bluff having a specific thing,
So-
like a flash snake that may or may not have death touch.
Monocolor makes sense.
That's pretty.
2 color maybe makes sense. 3 color?
Well, three.
3 color, you might have access to say 4 to 9 basic lands. Is it worth it to? I mean, sorry, not including wheeler math.
Yeah, I still just think it's optimal. If optimization is the thing you care about the most, and you have access to these snow basics, you should just play them.
If you are if your deck, or you can foresee your deck using any cards that care about snow lands, even extending that argument to like needing to resolve your tainted pact, then yes, without question.
Yeah.
However, if your deck has if you're 100 cards and you've locked in those 100 cards and you have no reason whatsoever to play snow lands, then technically Thermokarst and whatever, like technically it's a downside, but like the downside is legitimately, like if your deck has 0 ways to interact with snow.
Thermokarst.
And-
Look, I know what it's coming off like. I'm not trying to be like technically it's the superior fashion of deck construction, but it's if you're locked into those 100 cards and none of them have anything to do with snow, then,
Or taking your opponent's cards.
or taking your opponent's cards or whatever it may be, then don't play snow. Unless you don't care and you're going for aesthetics, then do whatever the hell you want.
That's fair. All right, friends. Any final closing thoughts? I mean, we've talked about this set now for close to 5 hours. Beej.
I'm barely learning things about magic here, so I want to ask about Prismatic Vista just really quick.
Sure.
Yeah.
Is the reason to include something that would hurt you like that, there you have to pay a life to do it? Because it's much better to have, oh, look, I have a land that now I can go looking for the land I want, as opposed to just being like, why don't I just put a snow-covered island
It could
in my
be
deck?
up to 5 different
Well, yeah,
colors.
it's because if you're playing a blue, black, and green deck, you take out an island, and that Prismatic Vista can still be an island, but it could also be a swamp or a forest if you need those more.
The nice thing is, if
understand.
you have a card that costs a blue, a black, and a green in hand, and you have a blue and a black and prismatic thing, you can get that third color. It represents the flexibility to fix your mana in play to accommodate the situation.
Which is why that's called mana fixing?
Yes.
Neat.
Whereas if that was just another island, you'd be like, oh, I now have 2 blues and a black. I can't cast this other spell.
You
It
can join me
also-
at Magic Fest Seattle for my advanced Highlander class that I'm teaching.
and
The art is also really good.
it's very
Yeah.
good.
It's good.
So Modern Horizons, any closing thoughts? We've talked about this
The
in
art
the most
cards
detail
are
ever.
really cool.
All right. Maybe not relevant to the format,
Well,
but
they are.
I'm glad that they exist.
This is the best set for Canadian Highlander of all time,
By what margin?
by the number of cards that this introduces to top tier archetypes.
And-
Now, granted, it's not like Black Lotus or Lightning Bolt.
Sure.
Okay.
But like every deck in this format
Has now gotten better.
got like up to 5 new cards. Like
That's pretty
and like top tier archetypes have gotten 5 new cards. That does not happen.
I know you have a document on this. What was the next best set, and how much does Modern Horizon beat it by?
Modern Horizons is standing at 4, and I want to preface because the other sets in this have a very loose definition of playable. Like I'm talking Rat Ninja's Tour de France definition of playable.
Sure.
The top set before Modern Horizons was at 42%, and it was Planar Chaos, I believe, or Future Sight. Some
That's
version
the percentage of the set that's
Yeah.
Highlander playable.
Yes.
What's Modern Horizons at?
49. That's a pretty big jump, and it's the cards that are included. They are not.
There's no filler. All
There's,
killer, no filler.
Like the most
Not quite,
filler
but-
cards are going to be some
like an oof.
Yeah, Ben, Collector Oof is playable.
like on, and not like Putrid Imp is like one of the like cards of like.
Goblin.
That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. It's just like it's a very specific card that can have application, but if it ends up getting cut in a year, like whatever.
All
Like
right.
yeah, this set is.
Well,
Oh, Poppy! Look at him.
All right, friends.
Daddy.
Well, then let's move on to our classic closing segment, Powerful Magic. And up today to tell us the story of Magic
Whoa.
Celebration, Woe.
It's terrible.
Of Magic Woe, we have Jer, who, all right, tell us about this bad beat story.
All right, so this is a spoiler for the Friday Night Paper Fight League, or a recap for those
Depending
of
if
you
you've
who have
seen it
already
or not.
watched it. Yeah. So, on the last day, I chose to play a old reliable blue-white control. I described it as going home, you know, just back to the roots. I love that deck. And I got a bunch of sweet new toys. I drew Teferi Time Raveler in every game, whether it was good or bad, you know. Sometimes I was like, oh, why? And other times I was like, hey, I can't lose.
always lucky,
But-
never lucky.
Yeah, it's the two sides of my hat. So I was playing round 2 against Cam on the feature match, and we had a really tight game 1. He top decked Falcon Wrath Aristocrat when I thought I was never going to lose. I had both Teferis in play. Was like an inch away from stabilizing and died to one of the only cards in his deck that killed me. Stupid Renegade Rallier being a human.
That was such a good line.
Because I was at 5.
Yeah.
I wasn't even dead to the aristocrat. He needed to also have a stupid human in
Needed
play.
to have literally a human to sack to even +1/+1.
And then in game 3, maybe it was that game. Maybe it was that game. In one of the games, no, it was definitely game.
I
It
believe
wasn't.
It was
It was.
game 3.
I think it was game 3.
Yes.
I started the game, Cameron mulliganed, and I told him what I kept. No. Yeah, this definitely was game 3. He'd already Cabal Therapied me in game 2 and missed. And then got me on the way back out. But oh no, man, I'm losing it. But anyhow, Cam blind Cabal Therapied me. I had a bunch of good cards in my hand. I had Snapcaster Mage, Jace the Mind Sculptor, some other stuff. He Cabal Therapied me and was about to name a card. I told him to wait because I might respond. You know, just start the mind games early. I wasn't going to respond. And then he blind named my Jace the Mind Sculptor and just absolutely sent me to the Shadow Realm.
Like, his
and not only
reaction.
won the moral battle, but he also won the match. So it just felt bad.
Blind therapies. I feel like there will be some people that this really won't hit home how massive that is.
It's
Yeah.
I think in Highlander over a decade plus, and I love Cabal Therapy. I play it when I shouldn't be playing it. I think I've hit 3 or 4 blind therapies lifetime.
Out of how many, roughly?
Oh, almost 500 probably.
When you look across the table and stare into somebody's soul, and you're just like, you have a Jace the Mind Sculptor in hand. Like, it's...
And I can respect it because I'm 7 for 12 on blind therapies in Highlander lifetime.
really?
Jesus.
wow.
Shout out to Liam. Hit him twice in the same match, blind therapy.
Oof.
My blind therapy claim to fame is Palancron.
Oof.
All I knew was that my opponent was on high tide, and I was like, Palancron. He's like, you got
Is
it.
that also Liam?
Maybe.
I'm trying to
Liam.
think of people who play High Tide, and the list is real short, and I know it wasn't me.
That's really funny.
Oh, that was hot. That
Yeah, I
was
got-
super hot.
I got Liam in a single match with Deceiver Exarch and Pestermite, both blind. I got him with Deceiver Exarch in game 1, and then game 2, I'm just like, Pestermite. And he almost flipped the table. It was fantastic.
All right.
Anyhow, that was a nice story of Cam joining the ranks of blind
The blessed
Cabal,
few.
True with
Cabal
it.
therapists.
Good. Oh my.
Like, you don't care what happens for the rest of the game. You're just like, I'm a real, actual wizard.
Oh yeah.
It's
Done.
like, you know what? I could be hit by a truck when I leave this.
Yeah,
Days?
that is
Driven
the
by
war.
Cabal
You have now won the war. What happens in the battle is largely irrelevant. But
All right, friends. Well, that's going to be our episode for today. Thank you so much for watching. A reminder, you can find most of us, including a bunch of Lurfolk and a Beej, at Magic Fest Seattle. Dates June 20th to 23rd, so we'll see you there. That's going to be real soon after this podcast goes live. A reminder that North 100 is also brought to you by you with your support over at the Patreon, over at patreon.com/LoadingReadyRun. Thank you so much for watching and listening, and we'll see you next time. Bye.